Welcome and first greetings to everyone today.
Mr. Lemoncello is here.
Guest author whose name happens to rhyme with Frankenstein. It's Chris Grabenstein. Yay!
Hi guys, how you doing up there? Good to see everybody. So yeah, this is fun. I'm glad we were able to connect like this. Oh, I turned my phone off here. We were talking the old-fashioned way on the phone, trying to get connected. But I thought I know you guys have a lot of questions to ask, but I thought I'd quickly show you around where I work every day. You guys want to see where I work here every day? This is a little 2-bedroom apartment in New York City, and we turned one of the bedrooms into an office for me. So here, we'll take a quick look here. Ooh, we're going flying now. We're going flying. We're going to look out the window. There's the window. That's New York City outside my window right there. And that building in the distance, it kind of looks like a castle. That's where a guy named Jerry Seinfeld lives. You can ask people, who the heck is Jerry Seinfeld? But he lives down there in the big castle. Let's get a little closer. The sun has to adjust. There we go. All right, now we come inside the room here. And whoop, up there we've got a poster from the Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library movie, which we all learned a very valuable lesson watching that movie. Never write your book report based on the movie. And then behind me, you'll see a bunch of the awards some of the books have won. And you cannot be a children's book author unless you have a frog chandelier. So that's my frog chandelier up there. And on the shelf there, that shelf where the bear and Baby Yoda is, that's one copy of every book of mine that's ever been published. There's 65 of those. But this is a little thing I want to show you guys. There you are. You can wave in the infinity funnel there. So I always have 2 computer screens going on. And over here is usually where I'm writing. And up above it, this is a little trick. I have walls that are covered with metal that I use magnets to put pictures up of faces and places of characters and things. So for instance, I have a new book coming out called The Smartest Kid in the Universe. And even though it doesn't come out till November, we're already working on the sequel. So I put all these pictures up there to remind me who the members of the cast are. And then I'm finishing up, hopefully, the final draft of another book called Dog Squad that we're doing for Random House. It's going to have all sorts of dogs in it. And over here, James Patterson and I are working on a sequel to Cat vs. Dog. So I got pictures up there to remind me what all those characters look like. And I find that it's, whoops, excuse me, I'm coming back into here, that it's better if you could be really specific. When you're a writer, the whole idea of writing is like Stephen King in his book on writing called it, writing is an act of mental telepathy, where you see a picture in your brain, you put some words down on a piece of paper, and whoever reads those words sees exactly what you saw. And the way to make that magic trick happen is with really specific details. And that's why I love to put pictures up so I can see details and remind myself what the characters and places might look like. And your parents may not want you putting stuff all over your walls, but you could get like a notebook or a scrapbook. One of my friends does a scrapbook. Every time she does a book, she'll put textures and pictures and things in there. So these are just some of the little tricks that you might want to use along the way. But I know you have a lot of questions, so hopefully I have a lot of answers.
Thank you very much for that tour of your office this morning, Chris, or this afternoon. Sorry, I'm getting all mixed up and flustered here.
The mustache, the purple mustache.
Yeah. So I would just like you to tell our Youth Book Club kids here, some of them are still trying to get in because they're having some technical difficulties, that Chris is one of my favorite authors. He is a champion writer for reluctant readers, and he says that he was once a reluctant reader himself.
Well, I'd rather use a different term, if I may. I like to think of reluctant readers, we are super critical readers. We don't want to waste our time on those broccoli books that everybody says, oh, that's good for you. You really must read those 22 pages describing the dew on the grass. That's good for you. It's like eating broccoli. I just want a book that gets like a movie going in my brain and gets a story going. And even as a kid, and even to this day, I have a whole stack of books where I've read the first 5 chapters and put the book aside because it just wasn't like clicking the switch in my head. So let's call ourselves super critical readers.
Yay! And my first question is from Cedric in the book club, who wants to know, what advice would you give to reluctant readers or super critical readers?
Well, one piece of advice I would give is, let's see, I would go. My friend James Patterson, that I write a bunch of books with years ago. Now, this is almost a sad story. He is the most famous author in the history of authors. He's had more #1 bestsellers than any author who ever lived. And he had a son. When his son was 10, 12, 13 years old, his son hated to read. So I know. So he's like the shoemaker whose son's running around in like bad shoes. And so Jim, over the summer, he said, all right, you don't have to mow the lawn this summer, but you have to read. But what he did is he went out and he found books that his son would like to read. Things like Holes by Louis Sacker, Bud Not Buddy by Christopher Paul Curtis. And then with the knowledge that he got, he worked with a bunch of librarians, and they put together a website called Read Kiddo Read. And on that website are all the books, and they're by different age categories, different interests, etc. But every book on there has been like tested to make sure it would be a book that was fun to read. So that is a great resource to go to. And of course, all my books.
Awesome. Well, Reed has a question for you. Did you ever struggle with spelling?
Yes, Reed. I constantly struggle with spelling. And when I went to college, I went to the University of Tennessee, which is in the southern part of the United States. And I was a journalism major. And when we were freshmen in college, we had to take a typing test where we had to prove we could type at least 50 words a minute, or they wouldn't let us take any sophomore level courses. And we had to take a spelling test to prove that we could, and it was going to be based on the 500 most misspelled words in America. And I was sweating bullets. And to this day, I still don't know how to spell necessary without a little help from my friend Microsoft Word. So I think, what's interesting, I think as writers, what's important is to give yourself permission to write a really bad, terrible, stinky, no good first draft. And that means it can have punctuation and spelling mistakes in it too. In that first draft, you're not going to show that to anyone. That's just for you. You sit down and you write and you get your ideas down. Now you've got something to react to and something to correct. But if you don't get something down on paper first, then you'll get nowhere. So don't be too hard on yourself at first, but do go through and try to look at the spelling, because we all have programs that'll help us, and there's dictionaries that'll help us. And just know that there are just some words that are against us. I don't know why it is about necessary. I can never remember if it has 2 C's, 2 S's, or 2 R's. I believe it's 2 R's, I think. I still don't know. I just try to avoid that word unless it's absolutely necessary.
So you don't have to be a great speller to be an awesome writer. Raleigh would like to know, what age did you start making books or writing books?
Well, I started writing when I was in the 5th grade, or grade 5, level 5. I don't know what you guys call it in Canada. But I was in 5th grade. I was like 10 years old. I was doing comic books I'd pass out to my friends. And 6th grade, I wrote skits for my friends to act in talent shows. In 7th grade, I had an English teacher who liked what I wrote so much, because I always wrote funny essays whenever we had a homework assignment. And she wrote in the margins of one of my papers, "You will make your living as a writer someday." So that's when I really sort of dedicated myself to thinking it might be a possibility, because when someone who isn't your mother or your father tells you you might have a talent, you sometimes go, ooh, maybe they're right. So from 8th grade on, I wanted to be a writer. So I wrote for newspapers. So here's the thing. If you want to be a writer or an author, don't try to write a book right away. Just write. Write skits, if you have a school newspaper, write a blog, write letters to the editor, and then see if you can get into a situation where you have a deadline. So when I went to college, I was on the student newspaper, which came out every morning, like at 6 o'clock in the morning. It was in all the dining halls. So all my stories had to be done by 5 o'clock the night before, and you could not have writer's block when you have a deadline. You can't go, no, muse is not hitting me now. I'm not feeling the vibes. You just had to write it and turn it in. And then I would write columns getting a little bit longer. Then I moved to New York City and I wrote for a comedy troupe, and I wrote little skits for the Muppets to talk on telephone. And I wrote episodes of a show called The Little Muppet Monsters. And a friend of mine and I, we wrote a movie that was on CBS television, a Christmas movie. And then I spent 20 years writing advertising, which were like 30-second movies, only 70 words, but you really had to tell stories quickly and grab people's attention. So I didn't think about writing a book until the year 2001, when James Patterson had left advertising. He was my first boss in advertising and went on to become this incredible author, and I thought there might be a connection. So I first started writing books when I was 46 years old, and my first book was published when I was 50. And in the intervening years, in the 15 years I've been published, I've had 65 different books published.
Cool. Well, I think that probably answers Morgan's question. Morgan is an aspiring writer, and he wants to know what advice you would give to someone who wants to be a writer when they grow up.
Oh, well, that's the technical stuff. But now when you're writing, I'll give you the same advice that James Patterson gave me when I was a junior copywriter, and he was the big boss, and we had like a training program. And he said, always write as if nobody wants to or has to read anything you've written. That you have to grab their attention with the first sentence and keep their attention all the way through. He often talks about writing as, you know, if you had a buddy and you want to tell your buddy a story, he said, hey, sit down, I want to tell you a story. You've got to be able to tell that story in a way that your friend doesn't like look at their watch or like, oh yeah, my mother's calling me. They want to get up and leave. You've got to keep them riveted. And that's another way to make your stories appealing to reluctant readers. Don't do everything you can so they don't want to leave. So you use a lot of suspense. You never take your readers where they want to go right away. And you always make them wonder what's going to happen next.
Cool. Jacob is a huge fan of the
Thank you, Jacob. Shout out to Jacob.
He would like to know. He's the one in the yellow shirt with the puzzle characters on it and the yellow and the hat.
Okay.
Know if you based the Lemoncello character off of someone you know, or did you completely make him up?
Well, as you learn from me, I'm kind of like Mr. Lemoncello, so he's based a little bit on me. And also, when I first moved to New York City, I did something called improvisational comedy, which if you've ever seen the TV show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's where you make up scenes and stories from audience suggestions. And the late Robin Williams, who loved doing improv, whenever he was in New York City doing a movie, he would jump up on stage with us. And so I got to know Robin Williams a little bit. And then also when I wrote for the Muppets, I got to know Jim Henson. Now, Jim Henson had the biggest imagination of anyone I've ever met. He also had more money than anyone I ever met. So he took that imagination with all that money. If you went to his office and opened the front door, a puppet named Gonzo. Every time the front door opened, this puppet Gonzo would raise its arm and a big flash camera would explode in everybody's face. And we always say that furniture had legs. All the furniture in Mr. Henson's office had legs that were sculpted to look like legs of his characters. So I kind of put the improvisational zaniness of Robin Williams or Jonathan Winters, who's another great comedian that I admired, with the creativity and financial prowess of Jim Henson and created Mr. Lemoncello.
Awesome. I have this question from a few different people, including Jacob. What is your favorite book that you've written?
My favorite book that I've written is the one that I wrote with my wife. The one called Shine that I wrote with my wife. That's my absolute favorite book of all time. Thank you. Oh, do I have a copy of it here? Yes, dear, I do. Here's this one. No, actually, this is one of my favorites. It's gotten mostly all 5-star reviews every time I see a review of it, because I think my books always have humor and heart. That one has even more heart than usual, and I think it's because my very heartfelt wife helped me on that one. So that's my absolute favorite. And I also love the Mr. Lemoncello books because before that book came out, nobody knew who the heck I was. And I also love the Island of Dr. Liebers because it's a lot of fun. And I like the Welcome to Wonderland stories too. Those are good. And you know, the smartest, I love them all. They're like my children. It's like asking my mother to pick her favorite son. She had 5 boys in 7 years. She picked me. But you know, they're all like your children. You can't pick a favorite one. But except Shine. Shine is my absolute favorite book ever written by anyone in the world.
In keeping with that, Reed would also like to know what were some of your favorite books when you were growing up?
Oh, Reed, this is a tough question here because now I have to reveal my age. When I was like 10, 11, 12, the same age as the kids who read my books, we didn't read books in school. We here, and when I was in the States, we had something called SRA, which was this big box of color-coded essays, and you read like the red ones, and you answered a bunch of questions, and when you answered the red ones, you got to read the blue ones, and then I think you worked your way up to silver and gold. We did not read any books in school. And except once you finally get done at the SRA, they give you something like the Red Badge of Courage, which was written, I think, in 1867 about the American Civil War. So I missed out on all of these books that I should have read. But lately, I've been doing a little remedial reading and catching up on all the books I could have read when I was a kid. And I just read Charlotte's Web like 4 years ago. It's good. It's good. I should have read it years ago. But, you know, I'm getting to discover a lot of the books. There's a guy named Edward Eager who wrote a book called Half Magic that would have been around when I was that age, and nobody ever showed it to me. So what I did read when I was young, I'll go back here. I still have a collection of them. This is what I did when I was a kid. I read Mad books from the people at Mad Magazine, and these were funny, full of satire. They made fun of everything, movies, commercials, and stuff. And this taught me more about the power of words than almost anything.
Awesome. Well, Leah would like to know, what was your inspiration for writing a book about a library escape room? Had you ever been to or heard of escape rooms before you wrote escape rooms?
You know what's very interesting, almost historically, escape rooms weren't a big deal when Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library first came out, because it's going to have its 7th anniversary this month. It'll be 7 years old this month. So it came out in 2013. And that's when escape rooms were just getting started. I wanted to do something about libraries because there are many librarians, such as Ms. Edwards here, who are much more fun than the librarians I knew when I was a kid. When I was a kid, librarians were all like, shh, be quiet, you'll wake up the books. Get your sticky fingers off the books, young man. Their whole job was to protect the books from the children. But when my first books for kids came out, they were a bunch of ghost stories. And I started doing school visits and library visits, and I started meeting this kind of new breed of librarians who made the library the center of fun and learning. And kids would come in like, oh, I read this Rick Riordan book last night. And the teacher would go, oh, if you like the librarian said, if you like that book, why don't you read this one? And I said, where were these librarians when I was growing up? All I had was SRA. So I knew I wanted to do something about libraries. And I had this thought in my head that could you get out of a library only using the information you found in a library? Because to me, like, a library has all the information in the world, so logically you should be able to figure out through research and doing digging an alternative way out. So the escape room kind of was built as my way of making a fun research project, because the other thing I wanted to do with this book is to make all you guys, when you go to high school and college and you're getting your law degrees and they make you do a research project, you'll go, oh, this is just a big scavenger hunt. I just have to run around, grab information from all these different places, put it all together, and make some sense out of it. Because if you make anything fun, more of it gets done.
Cool. Well, Brana's question ties in with this a little bit because she'd like to know, did a librarian help you research the Dewey Decimal System for your books?
Yes, I had a squad of 4 librarians on like auto email.
Dial.
And anytime I had a question, I would send it to them. And then when the first book came out, a librarian sent me a note. Apparently one of my Dewey Decimal Numbers was off by a number or so. And so I said, would you like to join the team? So on the fifth book, second book, I had 5 librarians helping me. So I do have these librarians I count on, and that's all the librarians in the book are named after librarians, mostly the ones who helped me. Even Dr. Zinchenko. There really is a Dr. Zinchenko in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Cool. I think that answers someone else's question here about, did you base the character librarian Yanina Zinchenko on anyone?
Well, that name came from a person I knew, but the idea behind Yanina Zinchenko was to take all the stereotypes of the old dowdy librarian who has all of her buttons buttoned up like this and wears tweed and has her hair in a bun. I don't know if you've ever seen a movie called It's a Wonderful Life. And Jimmy Stewart comes back and he gets to see what life would have been like if he'd never lived. And he's looking, where's Mary? Where's Mary? His girl his wife that he was in love with. But since he wasn't there for her to fall in love with, she never fell in love. Where is she, Clarence? Tell me, where is she? And Clarence breaks down and says, she's in the library. Because the worst fate that could befall someone in the 1930s and 40s was to be a dowager librarian. And so I wanted to take that image of like the old maid librarian. There's even a library action figure where she has an automatic shushing finger and she wears like tweed and stuff. And so I took that and spun it around because I wanted everything in Mr. Lemoncello's library to be the opposite of all the stereotypes. So that's why she wears red and she has high heels and kind of short skirts and has all this high-tech gear. She is the opposite of Mary, the Dowager Librarian.
Cool. Speaking of characters, Miguel, our book club Miguel, would like to know who the inspiration behind the character Miguel was in the Lemoncello Library series.
Well, when you're putting characters into books, you find you have your main character, Kyle Keeley's the protagonist, and he's going to need people to help him on his journey. One person he's going to need if he's going into a library is someone who's an expert on libraries. So that was the purpose for Miguel, but the character was based on, at the time, I was tutoring a 5th grader at my church. We have a little program called Homework Help where once a week we sit down and we work with kids on their homework. And my kid's name was Miguel Fernandez. And he was always, yo, bro. And almost everything that Miguel does in the book is what Miguel used to do at our tutoring sessions together. So be careful what you say or do around me. It might end up in a book someday.
Well, Dash would like to know, what would you say to someone who does not read the books if there is a movie version?
Oh, you're missing so much. You're missing oh so much. Because movies, for instance, that movie, the Escape from Mr. Lemoncello's Library movie, was an hour and 30 minutes long on Nickelodeon. That means the script was 60 pages long. The book is 300 pages long. So we do a little math. So 4/5 of what was in the book had to be cut out for the movie. And then you almost have to translate things from a page to the screen. So you're going to lose an awful lot. But I think what you mostly lose is the sense, and what I try to do with my books, you might notice I don't describe my main characters too much. I try to make it so you, the reader, can become the main character and go on the journey. And that's one thing you can do in a book much better than you can do in a movie. You can actually kind of become Kyle Keeley and feel as if you are the one on that adventure as opposed to sitting back removed watching it. So read the book, then watch the movie and say, oh, they left out all the good parts.
That's awesome. I have a question from a little bit older youth who wants to know if you've been to Disney World and if you based some of your library design on the 4D movie theater with the moving seats and the smells and that.
Yes, I did. In fact, I went there. I've been there a couple times. I've never been to Disneyland. I've been to Disney World and like that one thing they have, the Bug's Life, where you're sitting in chairs and it feels like bugs are running across your feet. And then I think there's a stink bug or something in 3D comes out and like blows stink stuff in your face. So yes, a lot of it as a kid, I went to the 1964 World's Fair here in New York City, and that's where Walt Disney first unveiled a lot of his animatronic kind of characters, and I love the Haunted Mansion with the holograms where you're riding in this car and all of a sudden there's a ghost sitting next to you and things are coming out of mirrors. So yes, Disney World was a big part of it. And you know, I'm told, I've never been there, but people have sent me clippings. There is a library in Florida that was designed by the people who designed Universal Studios in Orlando. And apparently it's the closest thing to a real Mr. Lemoncello's library with holograms and all sorts of attractions like that.
Cool, I have to go one day, but this has been so fantastic, but I'm noticing that we're going to run out of time here, and I have a very special library book club member who would like to say something to Chris Grabenstein. Jacob, would you like to speak to Chris Grabenstein? Well, just wait a sec to make sure you're unmuted. Are you unmuted?
Yep. Check.
Show him your t-shirt. Stand up so he can see your t-shirt.
I like the hat. Oh, I recognize that shirt.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to our book club today. It was an honor to meet you and talk with you about your books. I am a big fan of your Mr. Lemoncello series. Your books make us think, smile, and laugh out loud. Thank you for sharing your gift of writing and imagination with us through your awesome books.
Well, thank you for putting that little thing together and getting all dressed up. And tell you what, send me an email at author@chrisgrabenstein.com with your name and your mailing address. And I'm going to send you, a complete collection of autographed copies of all 4 Lemoncello books with the new covers. These are the new covers. They put new covers on the books. Yeah, well, thank you for being so nice to me. Yeah. Now everyone's going, I should have written the question. I should have written the question.
Thank you so very much. So that is just for Jacob to send you that email, right?
That's right, just Jacob.
Just making sure on that so that all the kids know. We can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your day to spend with kids from our little town here in Western Alberta, Northwestern Alberta. Thank you so very, very much, Chris Grabenstein.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me in. That was great. Nice meeting all of you guys. Stay safe.